and this webinar will be presented by my friend and colleague, John Burke, Nemertes CTO. Please submit any questions that you have along the way. We have some time at the end for Q&A, and we'll answer as many questions as we can. And with that, John, without further ado, let's just go ahead and get started. Take it away, John.
Thanks very much, Johna. And thanks, everybody, for joining us for this, the first and I hope short, sweet, and inspiring episode of the Beyond SASE SCAPE research series, because we want to lay the groundwork here for a lot of what we'll cover in future sessions in the series. So today we're talking about how successful is your SASE, measure your success with SIPI. SIPI is a success metric for security, or is a metric to use in looking at security. And we're going to talk our way through what it means and why you should be looking at it. I'll start, though, by introducing us, Nemertes, and the study that we did, SCAPE, to collect the information that we're working with here and in the rest of the series. And we'll define SCAPE for you because it's not a generally used acronym in the security industry. We'll talk about how good is a defensive technology and the definition of serious security incidents that leads into defining the SIPI. And then we'll talk about some other security metrics and wrap it up with a small number of recommendations and take questions. You can submit questions at any time during the session, so please do, and we'll answer as many as we can at the end of the session. So for those of you not familiar with us from our many public appearances and webinars in this Bright Talk channel, Nemertes is a research and strategic advisory company, and we focus on quantifying the business impact of emerging technologies. So what kind of actual benefits will a business realize by deploying an emerging technology? And so we're very focused on measuring the success of a deployment, and that leads to conversations like this one. Nemertes has been around since 2002. I joined the company in 2005 after spending 18 years or so doing enterprise IT. And I have, since coming to Nemertes, been focused on cloud networking and security issues. So SCAPE is an acronym for Secure Cloud Access and Policy Enforcement. And we undertook at the very end of 2020 and beginning of 2021 a research study on how enterprises are approaching SCAPE, managing secure access to their cloud resources, whether it's private cloud or public cloud, and how they're enforcing security policies in this context. We collected data from 157 different firms in just North America, really northern North America, the United States and Canada, across about 31 industries. On average, the companies are mid-size-ish, about 6,000 staff on average, and a little under $2 billion in revenues on average.
And we also conducted a set of interviews talking to our clients and others as part of that data. So when we say we captured data, that's a combination of benchmark interviews and survey.
Absolutely, Johna. Thank you. And we did this research to understand better how enterprises are negotiating the increasingly complicated landscape of security in the multi-cloud and work-from-home era. And so we focused as much as we could on sort of things in the current frame of reference of security professionals, endpoint detection and response, and extended detection and response, sort of an expansion of behavioral threat analytics, identity and access management as a service, cloud access security brokers, secure web gateways as a service, and then under the sort of omnibus framework, not product category mostly, SASE, secure access service edges, and the software-defined perimeter. So with all of those things in mind, we have been organizing this landscape in our minds into SCAPE, Secure Cloud Access and Policy Enforcement, which encompasses pretty much all of these things and folds them together to try and paint a more complete picture of protecting the enterprise, even as it comes to essentially span many, many locations other than sort of corporate properties. So it's not just data centers and branches, but also data centers, branches, co-location facilities, and all the cloud facilities that people's resources, applications, and services are being delivered from, as well as all the locations from which people are accessing those. So not just in the office again, but also in the home office, especially important in this past year, and on the road via mobile devices, via whatever people happen to have that can access a back-end system and make use of it. So that's our context. And of course, in collecting the information, we've got this framework in mind. SCAPE is our acronym for it. We didn't expect anybody to actually know that while we were doing the research. So we would always frame the questions in terms of these other point solutions or concepts like SASE that are more widely used.
Yeah, we created SCAPE because the world needed another security acronym.
And why not just create more? I agree. I mean, it's wide open space. So in the rest of this series of webinars, we will be discussing adoption of all those different technologies, how well they help you defend and protect enterprise assets and enterprise users, and all the associated information about those solutions, things like which vendors do better from the perspective of succeeding in security, and which security practices, like having this team run it versus that team, which of those correlate best with success. But what do we mean by success? So that's what we're talking about here, the metric for success in security. And we're focusing, because so many of these technologies are sort of outward facing and focused on defense, we're focusing on security incidents. And enterprises face any number, essentially an open number of security incidents on any given day. You know, some small companies may only face 1 or 2 an hour. Some may face millions or even billions if it's a big enough company spread across enough distance. And the automated defenses people have deployed protect them from most of them. So we got interested in working through what makes an incident a serious security incident. And so we put that question to folks and saw that for a solid majority, it is one or more of having an impact on employees, having an impact on the business, like bringing down services that you're providing to your customers, that sort of thing, and more direct impact on customers, e.g. customer data being stolen, or customer systems being compromised through your systems. And then to a lesser extent, about a third of companies, a little more, said that external contact being required in the wake of an incident is what makes it a serious incident. So if they have to report to law enforcement, if they have to report to some regulatory agency, those things are what make it a serious incident. And with that in mind, and the fact that security incidents are ubiquitous, and everybody has their own definition of what constitutes a serious security incident in their environment, we thought that the ratio of those two things is a clean and simple expression of how effective an organization's defensive technologies are. So since these technologies are, for the most part, pointing at finding and preventing attacks, measuring their effectiveness in terms of how many get through versus how many hit them is again, a reasonable, straightforward, intuitive, and accessible metric. It's one that people can actually generate. So we looked at that. We looked at, by their definition of serious security incident, how many serious incidents they experienced versus how many incidents they experienced. And we saw that overall, the median serious incident per incident ratio, or SIPI, overall, the median figure for the participants in the study was 0.13. So roughly 13 serious incidents out of every 100 incidents, SIPI of 0.13. We then looked at the data to see where the big breaks in the overall distribution were. You know, it's a bell curve like they usually are, but there are gaps, there are peaks and valleys underneath the smoothing curve. And what we saw was that the top roughly 21% of participants had a median SIPI of 0.02. So 2 serious incidents per 100 security incidents. And that we took as our break-off point for defining the group of people who are most successful in this piece of their security landscape. And then we will be doing correlations against membership in that success group. What do people in the success group do or not do? What products do they use or not use? And that will provide a lot of the material in our later episodes in this series. Please join us for all of them.
And John, before we jump from this slide, sometimes we get asked the question, you know, why did we pick 21% versus 19 or 22 or 20? You might want to elaborate on your natural breakpoints of the data comment, because I find that useful when I'm presenting.
Yep, as Johna said, I like to think in terms of the natural breakpoints in the data, looking for those places where there's a significant gap between one group and the next group. So if there's 21% of participants above that line, and then a significant gap, you know, maybe up to 0.5, I'm not 0.5, I'm sorry, 0.05 or 0.08, and then the next group follows from there, that makes it a natural breakpoint in the data. There's a significant difference between that group and the next group down. So that's where I was looking, and this is what I found. So if you have been following Nemertes security research and our webinars on the subject, you will have seen us talking in the past about a different metric, the mean total time to contain. So when an attack is successful, how long, I'm sorry, not even when an attack is successful, how long does it take the organization to detect, identify, and contain an attack when it happens? And so that is something that doesn't stop at the firewall, say, or doesn't stop at the secure web gateway, but gets past that. And how long does it take you to contain that threat? We look at that as the most important security metric because eventually everybody does get compromised. And how effectively the enterprise can respond to that is what matters most. So we're looking here at a narrower piece of the security spectrum than we have in some of the other security research. We're very focused on these defensive technologies whose main purpose is to prevent attacks, not necessarily to control response to an attack that succeeds. So it's a more narrowly focused metric, and we have seen in other research projects that people who have a good MTTC, who are good at containing threats, also have a good SIPI. They're also good at preventing attacks in the first place. So we look at this as not a sub-metric, but a narrower metric than the MTTC, and still look at that as our primary security metric for an organization. So as I said, once we've got these metrics calculated and defined and calculated, we can do these kinds of correlations against them. We can look at how much more or less likely the folks in that most successful group with the 0.02 or less SIPI, are they more likely or less likely to be deploying a technology, to be engaging a particular practice or approach to security? We can also, in some cases, look at the difference in the SIPI between the folks who are using a technology and the folks who are not. So independent of whether they eventually wind up in the success group, just using this technology, what kind of change in the median SIPI is that associated with? So we can do those kinds of calculations. And if you tune in for later episodes in this series, you will see security technologies with these kinds of associations. You will see security practices, like when to authenticate or in what order. You will see products like this specific EDR or XDR solution or that specific enterprise directory, and what are the associations with success for those. Those all form a big piece of what's coming next, so please do join us for that. And with that in mind, our short and sweet set of recommendations is measure key indicators of security solution performance. So yes, look at your MTTC, but use the SIPI for your defensive technologies, and that will help you focus your efforts there, just as measuring your MTTC will give you a better picture of your overall security effectiveness. And with that, I will hand it back to Johna, who will wrangle the questions.
Sounds great, John. Thank you much. Before we head into our Q&A period, I just want to draw your attention to the registration links in your attachments tab. As John said, we've got lots of goodness where this came from, and I encourage you to register for the upcoming episodes in this series. You also see a link to our website and our LinkedIn profiles. Please do connect with us. We love to hear from folks. So with that, let's get to a few questions. The first question I have here is from Jeff, who is asking, you talked about how you defined a serious incident. How do you define an incident overall? So John?
Sure. And it's a little mushy, and it always has been. Most folks can, with their security solutions, their firewalls, their intrusion detection or prevention systems, log when the system detects something that it's going to stop. And that can form your baseline incident count. Now, the thing is, you've got lots of systems involved in that, so you've got to have some kind of aggregation point where that information comes together. So typically that's going to be some kind of SIM or SEM or SIEM solution, something like Splunk or ArcSight, that pulls all that information together and lets you report on it. And should also then give you some help in reporting on serious incidents as well.
So yeah, other than its incidents, anything you measure, sort of more explicitly, we mean a cyber attack or breach of any sort of severity, anything from receipt of a phishing email to a successful DDoS attack, that, anything that is happening to you. So that's great answer for that. So a very astute question from Josh. When you're looking at SIPI, does Nemertes take into account the differences in vertical industries? Some vertical industries are hammered with incidents, some get very few. You mentioned that in the context of size, John, but do we look at verticals?
We can look at verticals and do split the data out by vertical. That's something that we do for our clients all the time, and sometimes do for these public presentations as well. We take it into account, but given the fact that there are order of magnitude differences between the number of targeted attacks on industries and the number of automated attacks that attack you because you're on the network at all, it tends to wash out in that first level of incident count. There are so many things hammering everything that's connected to the internet all the time that the target attacks are statistical noise to a large extent.
Yeah, and also sort of more broadly, what we tend to see is, the more sophisticated industries have more sophisticated and automated tools. So, as John was saying, they don't even show up, whereas a less sophisticated industry, something might show up that wouldn't even appear. So yes, it does vary by industry, and and it's worth considering when you're measuring your own SIPI to see how it compares against your industry, which of course is something we can help you with. That said, last question that we've got here is a question that Sam is asking: what tools can you use to capture and manage SIPI?
As I said, your SIM/SEM type solution, things like Splunk or ArcSight, or any of their more recently spawned successors, any of those can help. You can even roll your own if you're of a mind to with open source projects. That's the category of solution where you're going to start looking to pull this data out and put it in a dashboard and report on it and measure your progress on it with your specific solutions.
Okay, great. Well, that looks like all the questions we have for now. Thank you, John. And thanks
Thank
to
you, Johna.
all of you for your time and your excellent questions. The replay should be up on our channel shortly. If you found it valuable, please feel free to share it with your colleagues and take a moment to rate the webinar. It's much appreciated. If you haven't already, check out the links and the attachments chat tab and get registered for the upcoming episodes. And just to remind everyone, no, you will not get a copy of the deck unless you are a Nemertes client, but you are more than welcome to share the link hither and yon broadly as far as you wish, and people can watch the replay. So with that, thanks very much for joining us today, and we look forward to having you join us again soon.
Thanks all.